Hey guys, welcome to this week's episode of Weekly F1 Wrap Up with Jess. This week we are talking all things Miami Grand Prix. The Miami Grand Prix is becoming well known for being a star studded event. Celebrities and wannabe celebrities come out of the woodwork and pretend to be fans of the sport for 4 days. However, this has not gone down well with many F1 fans when it came to light that a well known makeup brand was taking a bunch of influencers on a trip to the F1 paddock, most of whom openly admitted that they had no idea what the sport was before they received the invite. Now, before you come at me and say, oh, you're just jealous, you're right, I am. And so are most F1 content creators, because this is the sport we live and breathe and love and invest our lives into. It's not just a one off thing or a nice weekend away, it's our reality. And we are constantly overlooked. And now I'm not going to go on a whole rant about that. But my point is, the brand who hosted this trip should have done further research and actually invited content creators who were involved with the sport, or at the very least knew what the sport was or was about before receiving an invite. Even below that, bare minimum, influencers who could pronounce the names of the teams. Alpha Romero, case in point. Anyway, my rant is over. Now let's get into the biggest stories coming out of Miami. To start off with, and now this is something I never thought that I would be discussing on here, but the prices of food at the Hard Rock Stadium in Miami were absolutely ridiculous. I know the paddock and everything with all of that, it's expensive, okay? But 62 Australian dollars for a Wagyu steak sandwich is ridiculous. Chilled prawns with mustard and cocktail sauce, 741 Australian dollars or 500 US. If you wanted the lobster rolls with aioli, truffle and brioche and potatoes, 450 US or 667 Australian dollars. Oh, but if you wanted some fruit, just like a basic fruit salad with some pineapple, watermelon, stone fruit, kiwi, and coconut, that'll set you back $295 or 437 Australian dollars. And if you're thinking, oh God, what? Trust me, it gets worse. If you wanted a salad, basic freaking salad, a normal price for a salad, a decent one, it's about 20 bucks, 25. Try 250 US dollars or 370 Australian. And that's just the cold stuff. If you actually wanted some warm food, an empanada was selling for 350 US dollars or 519 Australian. $275 or 407 Australian dollars. That's absolutely ridiculous. But God, if you wanted a platter with some ribeye, some quesadillas, some chicken tenders, and some sliders, 500 US dollars or $741. But hey, if money's not an issue for you, go ahead and order yourself the caviar for $400 US an ounce or 593 Australian an ounce. That is absolutely insane. The paddock absolutely does my head in, I swear to God. There were, however, cheaper options for us poor little plebs who can't afford to get into the paddock, where a cheeseburger sells for 15 US dollars or 22.25. And this is not a regular sized normal cheeseburger. This is a baby cheeseburger. And there were plenty of other options. But it is not boding well for inclusivity in the paddock or enticing more fans to join the sport. I don't know. I guess we'll see what the future of Miami Grand Prix food stalls has to offer. Moving away from the ridiculous expenses of the paddock and the drama off the track, Red Bull have had an absolutely magnificent weekend yet again, claiming another 1-2 finish in Miami, with Max back on top. But Christian has come out and delivered an absolute brutal sledge for Ferrari and Mercedes, in saying that their success is thanks to Mercedes and Ferrari's failures. Their lack of ability to overcome and adapt is pretty much what's fueling their success this season. And I mean, he's not wrong. So why were McLaren worse this weekend than we've seen previously? Well, that can be attributed to a few issues. Well, for starters, Oscar was plagued by a brake-by-wire issue on his McLaren, which limited his ability to brake effectively. So naturally, he wasn't able to progress as much as he would have liked. But with both cars failing to get out of Q1 and starting P16 and P19 respectively on Sunday's grid, the strategy was a bit lackluster, in my opinion. The decision to start on soft tyres wasn't great. I mean, it paid off for Piastri, who managed to get up to 14th by the end of the first lap, But Lando lost a lot of ground to Nick DeVries following contact at the first corner, which, I mean, is a Nick DeVries special at this point. But this aggressive strategy implied that an early switch to the hard tyre would be needed. Piastri did this just 5 laps in, and it ultimately didn't work out well. It worked well to begin with, but after the first stint, issues started to emerge. That's probably when his brake-by-wire failure and some other issues with the car kicked in. But Piastri did say that he braked one lap and it just went to the floor. So it could be just the brake pedal issue itself or something else. But thankfully, he is okay. But yet again, he was unable to score points. But despite this, Oscar is still the best performing rookie on the grid at this point in time. He's the only one to score points. I have thus far failed to do so. With some news outlets and speculation coming out that DeVries has been given, so after Imola, Monaco, and Spain, to improve. If he hasn't done so by the end of Barcelona, then Red Bull and AlphaTauri are going to look at replacing him. Now, ultimately, I would love to see Danny Rick back in that seat, but I don't see it happening. Liam Lawson has been spoken about of potentially moving into that seat. There's been a few other options as well of some guys moving up from F2 and moving into that seat. And it seems a bit harsh to be, we're not even halfway through the season and we're already talking about replacing him. We haven't really given him the opportunity to thrive. But one, he went into this saying, I'm not a rookie, but he's going to come out and pull that and not be able to perform. And yes, as I say it all the time, a factor of that is the performance of the car, P10 or P11. So for DeVries not to be able to do that is a concern, given his performance that he was able to bring last year when he had to replace Albano. F1 is a highly competitive environment. If you don't have what it takes, teams are not going to invest and spend the money. He has been successful in other categories, but maybe F1 isn't for him. It's not necessarily a copy and paste type thing. He's not necessarily going to just be successful because he has done well in other categories like Formula E. They've trialed it. It is not going well. He is consistently at the very bottom of the grid. So AlphaTauri and ultimately Red Bull have to do something because at the end of the day, it's their back pocket that is suffering. And I can hear it already. You're contradicting yourself. You said the opposite thing about Mick. And I know. And Mick was given every single opportunity, but he was also in a toxic environment. And I'm not making excuses. He did the best that he could. And I'm not saying Nick isn't doing that. But from a business perspective, I can see where AlphaTauri and Red Bull are coming from. Just as I can see where Gunther was coming from in releasing Mick. So we'll see how it plays out. We may have another person on the grid come the back half of the season. Logan Sargent. He has also not had a great start to the season. He is a genuine rookie. He's come through the ranks of F3 and F2, moved up to F1, and he's just kind of stalled. He's not performing great, so there has been, and he's crashed a bit. Let's be honest. There have been a few issues, and Williams and Mercedes are getting a little over it. There's a lack of performance, especially in comparison to what Alex Albon has been able to do, getting up into Q3. So the potential for the car is there. But again, it doesn't appear that there is a right fit. So what are they going to do? Well, again, a seat swap is on the cards. Sargent out, Schumacher in. And do I think this is going to solve all of their issues? No. Do I think Mick is ready to jump back in the car? Maybe, maybe not. Working in the simulator versus actually driving the car out on track are two very different things. Mick might be outperforming on the simulator and doing all sorts of things, exceeding everyone's expectations, but is that going to translate to on track? Does he maybe need some more time on the sideline to continue learning in the garage by talking to Lewis and George and harvesting their knowledge, speaking with engineers and getting the insight of what's in the background? Quite possibly. Either way, both Logan and Nick deserve every chance to be able to prove themselves and keep their seats. But the precedent has been set for mid-season swaps. Not only were there failures on track, there were failures off track as well. It's safe to say that the Miami Grand Prix went a bit too overboard with the dramatics. Having a massive introduction like they had. Like, I don't even have the words to try and describe what that was. It was awful. It was cringy. It was not good. We didn't enjoy it. The drivers didn't enjoy it. Why they did it is beyond me. But I think the most disappointing part of it was it's similar to what Oscar Piastri received in Melbourne. It was the very limited support for Logan Sargent at his home Grand Prix. He's a Florida boy, and hardly anyone got behind him, which is sad and disappointing. But again, I used the same argument for Logan that I used for Oscar, in that he's come up through F3, F2, all of which have not had a lot of publicity, have not been out in the public eye a lot. So people aren't exactly capable of, they haven't been able to see what he's capable of doing. And given his track run in F1, it hasn't been great. So I don't blame them. He hasn't exactly lived up to expectation. But that doesn't take away from the fact that it was sad. It was disappointing. It was just awkward to watch. I mean, here's to hoping that come next year he still has a seat and he's welcomed into the US in open arms. Even Austin or Vegas, that he just gets some form of support from his home country. I mean, he has 3 chances. DeVries gets 1, Oscar gets 1. So let's just hope that at some point before next season, his home country supports him. This has been my Miami Grand Prix debrief for this week's weekly F1 wrap up with Jess. I hope you have enjoyed and that you will join me next week for another episode. If you don't already, please feel free to give me a follow on TikTok or Instagram. And yeah, thanks so much for listening, guys.